Hello, ghoulies and ghosties and anything in between. And welcome to your second episode of Nerds and Nightmares. I am your host, Prince Luffy, here as always with my fabulous co host, Ruti.
Rudy. Hello. So for some, I don't know why, but the first time we tried to watch this movie, it was just like, lol, no. we tried multiple times to get it to work, but for some reason, when Luffy was trying to share it, it wasn't working. So then I had to share it.
I
But
blame
now we're finally here.
Discord.
I'm blaming Discord too, but we are finally here with the creature from the Black Lagoon.
The
Now, do we want to start?
1953 film.
Do we want to start with the history and then go into the plot?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the background.
Okay.
So apparently, and this is very fascinating to me because uh producer William Allen, of producer of this film, was apparently at an industry party when Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa was talking to him about this ancient Amazonian like cryptid legend called the Yakuruna. And he was and Alan was so taken by this that he wrote these notes down. And originally he entitled the story The Sea Monster. And strangely and interestingly, it apparently in the original notes took inspiration from Beauty and the Beast.
You can kind of see it a little bit.
I
A
think that
little.
this becomes a lot more interesting when we think about at least one semi homage slash remake that was later created.
We will get to that, of course.
Yeah.
So
Go
then it
ahead.
was expanded in 1952 into a full treatment with writers Martin Sim, Harry Essex, and Arthur Ross, and it was turned into The Black Lagoon. Now, following the success of the 1950 3D film House of Wax, director Jack Arnold was brought on to direct the film in the same format. And I'm gonna say this: I've seen the original House of Wax. The 3D is not as in your face because, like in that movie, there was a lot of stuff where it was obvious they put it in there to have it come out at you, but they kind of didn't do that here.
Yeah. I also didn't necessarily like feel like that things if I, sometimes when you're watching a 2D film, uh you go, "Oh, that part's definitely like meant to pop out in the 3D version or whatever." Like even if you're
Mhm.
not actually watching the 3D version, it's just kind of like obvious.
Mhm.
And go ahead.
So let's see. It was originally projected using a polarized light method, where the audience would wear gray polarizing filters, like how we kind of would wear the glasses. Thankfully, it was like losing steam, so it didn't stick around
Yeah,
for a
to
long
my
time.
understanding, as because like it was losing steam at the time, in most like in the bigger theaters they were showing the 3D version, but in the more like localized smaller theaters and drive-throughs and things like that, they were doing the quote unquote flat version, which is the 2D one.
Hmm.
So um I thought we could take a moment to talk about the do we want to wait to talk about the Yakaruna or talk a little bit more about the production first?
Let's talk about the production, then talk about the Ocarina.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so Millicent Patrick, who was a former Disney animator, was the primary designer for the head and face of the Gillman, the titular creature. However, Bud Westmore, the makeup artist, downplayed her contributions for over 50 years, and he received sole credit. But eventually, someone, I guess, came forward and said Millicent Patrick also worked on the like the head and the face. Now, um, this was interesting, but it turns out that there were two completely different actors for the Go Man, and the suit was also like kind of in pieces because the body of the suit was created by Jack Hevigan,
Kevin.
Hevgen, Kevin, who worked on Wizard of Oz and also made prosthetics for amputees during World War II, and then Chris Muller Jr. sculpted the head. Now, yeah. So the majority of the scenes were shot at the Universal City Universal City lot in California while they went to, Park Lake to do the on the water scenes because 'cause they're on a boat for a majority of this film.
Mhm. So, apparently another thing that is very interesting, the Gill man was also portrayed by two different actors. The vast majority of the above, like, slash the quote unquote on water scenes, he was portrayed by an actor named Ben Chapman. Apparently, the costume was incredibly hot, and
Yeah.
he would get overheated super frequently, making it really difficult for him to stay like in one place for like his 14-hour days. He was said to have spent most of his time like actually in the lake asking to be hosed down, um, because he was just so overheated. The headpiece itself apparently also fucked with his vision. So uh, during the scenes in the grotto, he repeatedly scraped co-star Julie Adams's head against the wall.
Gosh, poor Julian, poor Ben, jeez. And guys, this was, like, before we had, like, actors unions and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um, Back in, like, the '50s and, like, the '40s, they just did not treat, like, their actors and stunt people with a lot of care. We'll even get to a scene later in the film when we talk about it. And then, see, the underwater scenes, they were filmed in Wakulla Springs, Florida, and starred a stunt performer and a man who was also, like, an expert, swimmer called Bull Browning. He apparently
Mhm.
could hold his, breath underwater for up to 4 minutes. Um, However, he later said it was probably more like 2. He also then reprised his roles for Revenge of the Creature and The Creature Walks Among Us. Now, before we get to the movie, we're gonna talk about the creature that inspired this film, the Yakarina. And this kinda sounds a little familiar because, see, when I was reading, like, the Wikipedia, I was like, "This reminds me of a Kelpie, but this also reminds me of the Australian bunyip," where it's some type of creature that comes out of the water and lures people into the depths and kills them for whatever reason. We may never know. But,
Well, the Yakaruna, which I thought was it's a cryptid slash legend believed by indigenous people of the Amazonian basin. Um, I found this kind of interesting because not only does it cross over with some of these, like, pulls them down to the depths to kill them sort of um, creatures, but also arguably vampires. Um, because their whole thing with women in particular is that they would uh, turn into attractive men and use like their innate pheromones as like an aphrodisiac to capture these women and then drag them back down to their underwater kingdom, which is essentially in the legends is described as something of an Atlantis like city. It's underwater. It's an upside down mirror of human cities, palaces with walls of shiny fish scales and pearls, hammocks made of butterfly wings, snakes, and turtles.
how the heck they get in the butterfly wings?
I have no idea.
And so they changed how this one looked because according to myth, they're described as being hairy with backwards facing heads and deformed feet.
Hmm.
And apparently they ride black crocodiles as canoes. And apparently they're like Aquaman, they can talk to aquatic creatures. Um, they're also attracted to the odor of blood and menstruating women,
I guess that's how they find the wives.
which, I mean, in a weird way, that does make sense because then that means, hey, she's possibly getting ready to have a baby. So I take her now, then we can
Hmm.
have the baby. Because, see, they were thought to be dangerous spirits responsible for like disappearances and like mysterious pregnancy because, back then we didn't have, smartphones and cameras and everything. So if some woman got mysteriously pregnant, you were like, oh, it was the Yakarina who did it.
which which honestly many women probably said it was the ocarina to avoid the stigma of possibly getting pregnant out of wedlock.
Pro- Probably, yeah.
But
So
yeah, they like lured humans into the water, and apparently the humans themselves would gradually transform into these creatures. Like the eyes, and then their heads would turn backwards, and then they can't find their way home, so they have to go live in the underwater cities. So
that's dark.
the idea, I guess, is that they would drag these humans, specifically women, to essentially beat their fish wives, which, for lack of a better term, that's not actually what a fishwife is, but
Okay, so now we start off in the Amazon, quote unquote. Again, this is the 50s, so they're not actually in the Amazon. Um,
you probably couldn't
and
get the
I'm just gonna
budget.
say this: there are some not great depictions of people of color in this.
Oh yeah.
We're pretty sure everybody in the cast was white, so we're Dr. Carl Maya. I think that's how you say his last name.
Yes.
He finds this like clawed webbed hand in some limestone, um and he tells, "Hey, y'all stay at the camp. I'm gonna go to my buddy over at the Marine Institute," because he has a former student named Carl who's an ichthyologist. That's the study of a man who studies fish, or a person who studies fish.
A
um
fish
he's
scientist.
Yep, he's been working at the aquarium in California. Also his girlfriend, who we
Okay.
don't know if she's a scientist or not. She seems pretty smart, but it never seems like she's given
No,
the
she is
role of a
a
scientist.
colleague. She also works at the aquarium and seemingly under their joint boss, a Dr. Carl Williams. So essentially,
I think he meant Dr. Mark.
oh yeah, you're right. I did mean Dr. Mark. Dr. Mark Williams. Please, you're gonna have to edit that out. Thank you. Uh, yeah. So they're discussing, like, he brings everybody together, and they're all discussing like this uh like fish hand that Carl has brought back, and David manages to persuade his boss Mark to fund a return expedition to the Amazon so they can look for the rest of the skeleton, essentially, because this webbed hand they think is a possible like signal that there's a missing link for evolution that they can find.
So then we go back to the camp, and I think it's Thomas and Louise. They stayed behind. Well, the creature from the Black Lagoon appears, and or the Gill Man, as I'll call him, attacks them and ends up killing them. And then, so this is when they get aboard their boat called Rita, and we're introduced to Lucas, who I think is supposed to be Brazilian, but again, we think that all the actors in this are white.
Yeah.
And he also constantly has like a big old cigar in his mouth. Even when he's like not smoking it, it's in his mouth.
Yep.
So they arrive at the camp and discover Carl's assistants are dead.
Apparently he was
And
Portuguese. Interesting.
oh, he was. Okay. So Lucas says yes that it was like a jaguar, but everyone's like, a little uneasy because they come and the first thing they find is two dead bodies.
Yep. So they're like, oh, this is great. So they decide to start like excavating the area, but they don't find anything. I thought this scene was quite funny, that like all the scientists are using pickaxes and various construction like early 50s construction equipment. So
Mhm.
pickaxes, hammers, that kind of thing, to excavate this area while Lucas, the captain, is under a tree smoking, laughing
He
at them.
does
He just
not
does not care.
care.
He does
He's
not
just
want to be
watching.
involved.
And one of the scientists has this big old pipe in his mouth. And I'm like, dude, you're working with stuff that's like really delicate. Maybe it's not a good idea to smoke that pipe. But again, this was the 50s. And this was before people knew that smoking was like extremely bad for you.
During
Um,
the aquarium scene, Mark is also smoking in like just in the aquariums, which is obviously was a cultural norm for the time, but
yeah.
in 2026 is kind of jarring.
It is. Again, that was just they didn't know that tobacco was really bad for your lungs. So then I think is it Dave? I think
Uh,
Yeah, Dave
yes,
says that
David.
they think maybe part of the skeleton fell into like the water, like the limestone crumbled and it fell into the water and took it somewhere else. And that's when they go to the actual lagoon. Um, And Lucas even calls it the Black Lagoon.
And then he
And
claims it's a quote unquote paradise from which nobody has ever returned, which frankly doesn't sound like a paradise. It sounds quite ominous.
yeah. And then we get another death. One of the oh wait, no. Actually, we see that the creature is watching them, and this is where we get like the Beauty and the Beast thing because we have so I think we had a scene where David and Mark they go down to swim. They're looking for rock samples, and then Kay decides to jump into the water, and she's swimming. And you've probably seen like this scene of her in the white bathing suit. It's like a very iconic look, I guess. And that's even what they used for the poster was her in the white bathing suit and the creature carrying her.
Yep.
The creature's like underneath her, swimming below her, and like kind of looking at her and like trying to grab at her feet.
Yeah, he's like hiding amongst the like seaweed. He's stalking her. There's really no
Yeah,
other
basically.
way
Yeah.
to put it, but it's like a very um the scene is very cinematic and some of the little swim moves that Kay does were pretty entertaining. She did some like interesting little like twirly flips under the water that looked
hmm
almost a little bit more like synchronized swimming than like just regular fucking around swimming.
And like we even like as we were watching, we could tell that she had like very strong arms and legs. So it was obvious she either learned swimming for this film or she was a swimmer beforehand. And also, like we mentioned, that the guy playing the creature, he's also a swimmer, and you can tell that he's even in the suit. You can tell that he's a very good swimmer.
He also like changed the way in which he's swimming to look more like an underwater creature. He kind of like
Mhm.
weaves back and forth a little bit like a fish or an eel might,
Yeah.
which I thought was a really interesting choice. And I thought it did really make the Gilman seem more fish like in
hmm
execution. I really liked that. So
So, oh, go ahead.
basically, Lucas, the captain, notices that Kay is a little too far out, and they call her back to the ship before she notices that her feet are being grabbed by the big gill man.
It's just like a kind of an odd scene because he's like trying to catch her feet. It's like her feet are not that far. Why are you having such a hard time grabbing her feet? But anyways, when she gets like she starts swimming back towards the boat and the gill man follows her, but he gets caught in the net they have. Now being, really big, he manages to like escape, but he leaves a claw behind.
Mhm.
So they're like, "Oh, what the heck is this?" So then Mark and Dave go back underwater to search for the creature. For some reason, Mark is like really hell bent on killing the creature, like straight off the gate. Like, we gotta kill it.
Yeah.
So, what it is, we gotta kill it. Dave seems to be a little more thoughtful and understanding because Dave brings a camera. Again, Mark brings a harpoon gun. And when they come across the creature, Mark shoots at it. But I think, does he miss or does he? I think he gets one
He
shot in.
he got like one shot in and near its like flank slash ass area, but it like seemed to not really care and swam away. It was just like,
Yeah.
whatever, dude, you did that.
So and then they go back up and they're all like, Mark and David are arguing because I think Dave is like, we need to study it. Mark's like, no, we got to kill it. Um, which I think, again, I was saying it's kind of dumb because, like, if Mark and David brought this back, it's like you guys would be automatically famous. Your names
Yeah.
would be in history books and stuff. But also, it's kind of obvious as Mark is like the secondary antagonist in a way.
Yes.
We kind of think he might have like had a crush on Kay or something and maybe was jealous of David. 'Cause he made,
But
like, some weird comment towards her
yeah, he
about
did make a couple of kind of strange comments about their relationship. You can cut this part out, but my notes are at the bottom of the document for this part of the plot.
yeah, I see them.
Okay, no worries.
Alright, so they're discussing, like, this issue, and Kay even, like, brings up the fact that we're still, like, discovering creatures in the ocean, and, like, even today, we're still discovering it because the ocean is deep, y'all.
Yeah. She brings up a specific creature called like the Kamongo that actually
Mhm.
also like breathes air and has like actual lungs. And they there seems to be this disconnect, yeah, between Mark and David, where Mark's um ideals seem to be driven a lot less by science and a lot more by money and fame. And I and he seems to just have no issue with the idea of killing a new species, which reasonably, even if David didn't give a shit about like money or fame, reasonably from even a scientific perspective, I would argue it's better to observe something, and even if you observe it in captivity, than to kill it and never learn anything.
Yeah. Like, they would still learn stuff, but if they observed it while it was alive, they would learn more. But again, Marcus just so hell-bent on killing this, and then Lucas, the captain, actually comes up with a good idea. He says, "Let's use Rotan." It's a
Wrote
type
to
of
known.
rotenone. Thank you. A fish tranquilizer that, uh, interferes with the cellular respiration of the fish, and it causes them to rise up to the surface. And that is actually, I think, a good idea because that way it's not as what's the word? Messy, not as harsh, you know?
Yeah. Like, it's, to my understanding, it can often be employed in scientific endeavors to essentially uh, tranquilize and draw out a fish that is maybe super shy, hard to get a hold of, and uh, capture it for observation. And I think that uh, it's a good plan. So they did put all of these like tablets in the water of the rotenone, which they kind of look like Alka-Seltzer tablets, like when you
Yeah.
put them in and like the fizzing up to the surface. And we get a minor like flash forward where the rotenone doesn't really seem to be working. They're all just kind of meandering around on the deck, but there's like a bunch of small fish that it's clearly worked on, like they're just floating in the water, chilling. They're probably dead, unfortunately, because if they're up at the
Yeah.
surface for too long like that, they stop, they won't
Mhm.
breathe. And so Lucas is like, well, why don't we try to sink the tablets lower? Which uh, Mark and David go back out of the boat and do the same thing, except it's like the same footage of the tablets of the water, but apparently they're sinking them lower. We are told this.
And then, and see, again, like, Mark is sort of, losing his mind a little bit because, like, they hear a banging noise and Mark, like, immediately grabs his gun. Um, and he's saying as scientists, like, we only deal with known things, but David's like, we're still discovering things. And I'm like again, I'm with David because it's like one of the things about being a scientist is like there's so much we still don't know about, like, not just space and the ocean, but even our own world.
Yeah. And you also have to note that like at the time, um, we knew even less about space because this is
Mhm.
like prior to the moon landing.
Yep.
So David does have a point. Like, and I definitely am more with him throughout this.
Yeah, because I also feel like David's Mark is not thinking about like the safety of anybody else. It just seems like he's hell bent on killing this thing so suddenly, and then like night comes and the Gill man comes out because remember he saw Kay and he's all about that life now.
Yeah.
He pops out of the water, and we also learn that he doesn't like lanterns because fire. He smacks one away, and as he gets on who the onto the boat, is this when he attacks the guy, or is that the second time
No,
he gets on the boat?
that's the second time. Basically, he just
Second time.
whapped the lantern into the water, leapt back in, and swam away. They realize he seems to dislike like fire and bright lights, so they get the big spotlight and they shine it under the water, and he just kind of like growls and then like dives down.
Mhm.
And this, yeah, go ahead.
So again, Dave is like the only dude here with a conscience. He's like, "Oh no, what if he suffocates because of the tranquilizer? So I'm gonna go down and like check on him." Mark, of course, comes with him. We also like noticed that only Mark and David use the aqua lungs
Which are the
in
scuba
this.
gear.
Yeah, so we're thinking that maybe the actors were the only two who had their like certifications, but we also even pointed out that they're not wearing like bodysuits; they're just in shorts.
Yeah, they're just in like regular bathing suits and flippers, which neoprene diving suits existed at the time. My assumption is either that they couldn't afford them costuming wise, or
Mm.
they wanted the actors to somehow be like recognizable under the water.
Yeah, but like, so this was a comment that like I made when I think David was coming out of the water and like these are tight shorts.
Yeah.
They are squeezing his booty cheeks, and I was just like, did the director just make sure that everyone had really nice butts? Because damn.
Caked up, caked up.
On every day, all day, and also just, we got 2 men who were just shirtless, like, most of the time.
Yep. They
Uh,
so David notices the area like where the man like went down in the water, and he goes down and he discovers that it's like a underwater area that surfaces in a grotto, which is a wet cave essentially with like water in the middle.
mhm.
Um I thought this was kind of funny because as Mark and David are like in the grotto, kind of looking around, the Gill man, who is like he's turned. he's straight zooted. He's clearly the rotenone is having some sort of effect because he's like just shambling around. And I don't know how they managed to make a fairly static mask look drunk, but it just really feels like it does.
Yeah, 'cause see, we mentioned that the eyes of the mask, they don't move, but that kinda adds to the whole thing, just something about the eyes not moving, adds to the way he's moving, like he's
Mhm.
kinda shuffling, he's, like, trying to stand up. Um, and then so as, Mark and David are, like, trying to figure out where the Go man went, he managed to get, back on the ship, and one of the crew members tries to protect Kay
It was
and
the beach. She was like waiting
beach.
for them on
That's
the
right,
beach on
that's
the other
right.
side of the grotto.
I remember because she turns around and screams, and then one
Yep.
of the crew members tries to protect her, and he strangles her, and then he tries to carry off Kay, but the drug, like, finally hits, and he collapses.
Yeah.
And Mark once again, Mark is just ready to kill this thing. He grabs a gun and starts, like, hitting it, but David stops him, and then they put him in a cage they made. Now, I know that they don't have, like, access to metal or anything, but the cage they made was, like, made of, like, what, bamboo shoots or something?
It looked like bamboo shoots, which arguably can be fairly strong if they're tied together correctly, but
Yeah, but
I would also think that like what seemed to be something of a fishing vessel would have like one of those. They usually
yeah,
have like
that's
tanks in
actually
the
a good point.
middle, like a
That's a
lot
good
of the
point, actually.
time to keep the catch in. But
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's
I
see,
I thought that the scenes of this creature just sitting, you just see his little head with his unblinking eyes, like
him
in the cage is
reopening and
just so
closing.
funny. They were so funny.
They were. I know it's, like, supposed to be taken seriously, but he looked a little goofy, when in those scenes. And so, you know, um, Mark is ready to go home, but David says, "No, we gotta study the grotto."
Yeah, he's like,
Um,
"We got the guy. We're gonna go home." And David's like, "No, we're fucking scientists."
"Dude, why do you wanna go home so badly?" And then Edwin, who's another scientist, he's on watch. And then, again, we see the Gilman sort of, like, figuring out how to get out of the, like, cage. And see, like, the reason that I was sort of calling out the bamboo is just, like, you guys know he's, like, really strong. He's already,
Yeah.
like, killed multiple people. I don't think the bamboo's gonna stop him, and it doesn't.
He
Um,
tore through that net like it was nothing. He was apparently impervious to a harpoon gun.
Mm, yeah, like, they shot him, like, 2 different times, and both times it did nothing. So, of course I mean, and I don't blame, like, the gill man for getting really annoyed. It's like, "These motherfuckers came into my home, they're swimming in my water, then they capture me, and one of them tries to kill me." So he gets out of the cage, and Kay had come to talk to Edwin because she was talking about how she feels like, "I really love David, but I also feel like I need to be loyal to Mark, who is my boss."
She mentioned like that he helped kickstart her career and stuff, which in the time period I could understand why that might draw loyalty from a female scientist. And Edwin basically says to her, "No, you've given back more than enough to Mark. You're very capable, and he's lucky to have had you this whole time." And like it's a pretty like it's a somewhat touching scene, like
It is.
uh and it gives us some interesting like insight and backstory, but then like the Gale man has gotten free, and we're back to his watery antics.
And once again, he's trying to get to Kay because he's, like, madly in love with her, and, like, the Yakuna legend, take the women, turn them into fish women so they can have fish babies. Edwin tries to protect Kay. He grabs a lantern and tries to, like, scare the gill man, but the gill man grabs his face and, like, apparently does a number on him. Um, then Kay smashes a lantern over the Gill's man's head, and he catches fire and he leaps back into the water. And when I saw that, I'm like, I really, really hope they didn't actually set the actual actor on fire, but I have a feeling they did because again, this was the 50s. There was like no actors union. There was no
I
rules and
mean, to be
regulations.
fair, to stunt coordination, they still set actors on fire. That does happen. They are put in very specific suits. It's done by, it's
Yeah,
meant to be done by stunt actors in stunt coordination
professionals.
like situations. What I found vexing about that scene was the wet fish man who is wet and caught fire so easy. I
Is
oh,
the water full of oil or something?
I I guess maybe I don't know enough about fish anatomy. I didn't think you could immediately set them on fire. I did not think
Yeah.
that was a thing.
Yeah, but we gotta get the shot. Gotta
The
get the
shot was
shot.
good. Presumably, if it was the same actor um who did any of the other stunts, part of like a fire stunt apparently is the ability to hold your breath for quite a while because you can't inhale when you're on
Yeah.
fire. You'll burn your lungs. So if he could hold his breath for enough time to leap into the water, which presumably put the suit out, uh, good luck to him.
So then Edwin's face is covered in bandages. We never see his face again. Um, so David is like finally like, okay, you know what? We need to leave. While Mark is like, we can return with better equipment, and it's like, okay, so
No,
we've had at least
David,
3 deaths, and
Mark
then
wants to
Edwin gets attacked.
stay because it's minor mix. Mark wants to stay because they lost the prize essentially.
Yeah,
And David's like, no, we can come back with a team of people who are like equipped to do this. Like we do not need to stay and catch him right now. We know where it is. We know he's here. We've already lost like 4 people. Edwin might die. Like,
we need to get out of here.
yeah.
We don't have like the medicine to help him with his wounds. And Mark makes a dumb choice and he threatens Lucas, but Lucas basically says, I'm the captain now. Like, he has a knife and basically says it like, I'm the captain. We are freaking leaving. And okay, so this next scene I thought was a little ridiculous because so they're on the Rita and I think it's Carl's at the front of the ship and
Mhm.
there's a blockage, but they kept acting like this was massive, like it was a monster, like, tree that fell, and it was, like, a few branches or something, but they acted like it was the worst possible thing for them to see in the water.
Like, I have to agree, it didn't seem like an intimidating, one, I thought it was interesting that the Gill Man is apparently now part, like, I don't know, beaver and building essentially a beaver dam. But I have to agree, the branches and stuff that they chose for this particular scene weren't very big, and they weren't particularly intimidating. They were much smaller than the hull of the boat. It certainly wasn't an iceberg. Like, but they were like, "Oh no."
This is the worst possible thing. What are we going to do? We can't get our boat around this obstacle, so they come to, the blockade. Carl shoots at the water, but the Go Man swims away. So they have a winch. So David borrows it to place it on the branch and lift it up so the boat can get through. But apparently the Gill Man's not that dumb, and he goes under. He's underwater. He grabs the winch and he pulls his blockade free.
Uh, to For a quick note, for people who don't exactly know what a winch is, it's essentially the like pulley system that is used to bring up and down like the fishing net that they were using and like the anchor. But instead of using it for that, they were trying to take the cable and wrap it around the branches, the like five thin little tree branches. So yeah, basically after that fails, David is like, I'm gonna uh use the aqua lung and go underwater and release the blockade. And uh Mark is like, I shall go with you. And he's like,
David's like,
the fuck
"Nah."
you will.
And they have one of those fist fights where the punching sounds are very loud.
They're like that stock punching noise that
Yes.
used to be used all the time.
And see, they're doing this in the room where Edwin's lying on his bed with his bandages, and Edwin even, like, looks up like, "What's going on?"
Edwin's actor, because the rest of his face was wrapped, he was doing some fabulous eye acting. He did
He
a great
was.
job.
He's like, "I'm still in this movie, I'm getting my paycheck." So, okay, so they're trying to he's trying to put the rope back on to get, the blockade out, and the Gale man swimming toward him, and then all of a sudden there's a shot from the harpoon because Mark decided not to listen and got in the water anyway.
Yep.
Um, and this is, I think, the second time the Gale man gets shot with a harpoon, doesn't do anything.
Yep.
Apparently, they didn't learn their lesson the first time. And again, once again, the Gill man is frustrated and upset, understandably so. So he's like, "This, I've had enough of you." And he and Mark get into an underwater scuffle. He gets rid of the harpoon, and he starts to pull him down towards the bottom of the lagoon. Think in order, like, to drown him.
Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting that like the way that they chose to kind of portray this scuffle, the Gill man keeps kind of like twirling Mark around. It's a bit like a crocodile, like a death roll, where a crocodile, like, or an alligator chomps a deer or whatever that comes near the water, and then it rolls really fast to like kill them. But
Hmm.
being limited by the fact that it was the 1950s and it was just a dude, he's not whirling quite that fast. But I definitely think that that was kind of meant to invoke that, like, he's trying to kill him feeling.
Hmm. Now, again, since this is like the 50s, we don't really see Mark's injuries, but David manages to swims up to the Gill man and gets Mark's body free, but it is very obvious that Mark is dead. He floats to the surface. Um, David, grabs his body and swims back to the Rita. They're trying to figure out how do they get past the blockade, because they're like, we need to get out of here now. And then I think Lucas said something like, I think he compared the Gillman to like a mosquito. He's like, "Do you think this creature is like a mosquito or something?"
Yeah.
And that inspires David. He comes up with an idea.
Yeah. So basically, David asks, "Do we have any of like the rote to know left?" And they're like, "We do, but not like a huge amount." So they the whole idea is essentially to make um like an aerosolized spray using the leftover rote to know that's like bug spray. And they use one of the scuba tanks to eject it. So they're starting, like, the hope is that they can stun the monster and David will have enough time to wrap the cable with the winch around the tree again before he can like pull it all apart. But as Carl and Kay are like mixing up the rotino and like attaching it to the like scuba tank, Edwin's still in this bed, and there's like a little porthole over like his sick bed, and all of a sudden the gill man's hand just comes
Reaching
through the
in there.
window, and he starts trying to like snatch him up and fuck him up, but Edwin can't like scream or anything because his mouth is completely wrapped. Thankfully, they eventually notice what he's trying to do, and
Thank
Mark,
God.
oh, not Mark, I'm sorry. David grabs like I think it was a hammer or something. He basically
Yeah.
starts smacking his hand like no, no, like
Bad Lagoon monster.
that's not dinner. Bad, bad. And he, withdraws his little hand and they shut the porthole. That scene was probably scarier at the time that it came out, but I thought it was very funny.
Again, like this is supposed to be a horror movie, but some of it has not aged well.
It's one of those things that many horror movies of the era go through where they age into more of a comedy.
Yeah. Because also like another thing is this was a big thing in a lot of these old movies is the the woman was just constantly screaming.
Yeah. She didn't get to
And
do much aside from that.
yeah, she's kind of just there I think to be the eye candy. And like something for the gill man to be obsessed with. So David goes back under the water and and he blasts the gillman with the spray on the surface. They're all watching and they're like really nervous. And the gillman keeps trying to come for David, but he's keeping him back with the spray. And when he comes back up, they think all their problems are over because now they can use the winch to stop the blockage. But the gillman gets onto the ship and just grabs Kay and just jumps into the water like, fuck this shit, I'm out and this is mine now. Like,
Yep.
it's like it's like none of you were watching or none of you were like keeping the lookout to make sure he wasn't getting on the boat, but okay. And that's where
No.
you get the famous scene of him carrying Kay's body. And see, I even commented on this. Since we knew the suit was kind of hard to move in, it's like, was he not able to carry her another way? Like maybe have her like hoisted up on his shoulder, or maybe have her wrap his legs around her and he's like carrying her because the thing is since he couldn't move that well, he accidentally hit the actress's head like on rocks and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like because it also almost seems like he's having trouble carrying her.
I think that the reason they probably didn't go with another carrying style was because they felt it was cinematic to have him
Probably.
like carry her essentially bridal style, her
Probably.
passed out body.
Yeah, that's
So
a good point.
David obviously pursues his girlfriend, uh, and he like comes out into the grotto, and he brought the gun with him this time because now the Gale man fucked her out, and he's about to find out. He finds Kay like passed out on a rock just in the middle of the grotto. He wakes her up and they reunite. And it's not like for her having been dragged through the water, apparently passed out and stuff, it's not like he wakes her up like via CPR or anything. Like he just kind of shakes her awake.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of, uh
She sounds okay. She doesn't have any injuries. There's no water in her lungs.
I would
Okay.
think she'd have to cough out some water or something. But as he's doing this and they're hugging, the gill man, who is apparently in like the water next to the rock, just pops up out of it again and starts going after David. And he even like lifts him above his head at one point.
This dude's
Like,
strong, man.
yeah, he was really strong.
So then Carl and Lucas show up and they shoot him a few times. However, we mentioned like David seems to be the most empathetic person in the group because he then tells him like stop, stop, that's enough. And the Gilman like kind of stumbles back towards the water and like dies.
Yeah,
And I
he
think
like
David was
sinks
like,
back in.
yeah, like David was like, let's give this creature a dignified death because I think, again, like I was a little shocked because normally you would have like somebody, the humans would be blaming the monster, but I think David having like more empathy kind of realized like, yeah, this is a monster, but we did kind of like invade his home. Let's let him die with some peace. And we watch his body sink to the bottom. The end.
Yep. The end.
So now we're going to talk about the reception, the legacy. This film is considered to be like one of the like a classic piece of horror. It has even been recognized by the Film Institute. And the creature, the Gilman, has starred in a lot of stuff. I think this movie is in like the public domain. I'm not 100% sure. Um, but there's been a cultural impact nonetheless. So I actually reviewed this on my other podcast with my other co-host Jad called Mad Monster Party. It's a Rankin Bass production from 1967 where a bunch of monsters are invited to Dr. Frankenstein's house because he's like retiring.
Yeah.
And then he also showed up in another Rankin Bass film called Mad, Mad, Mad Monsters. He also appeared in the American horror comedy Monster Squad. He allies himself with Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and the Wolfman, and they're trying to get a magical amulet to conquer the world. Um, this also inspired a 2005 film, which was a black and white horror film, Frankenstein versus the Creature of Blood Cove. And then we're, of course, since we're here, we also are going to talk about The Shape of Water. So that came out. Which year did that came out? That came
Well,
out in
let's first I want to
2017.
talk a little bit
Hmm?
about the Universal Classic Monsters.
Go ahead.
So essentially, the film was a hit at the time, and it joined this pantheon of super popular monster films that were released by Universal Studios during the time, known as the Universal Classic Monsters. This started in the 30s. When Universal Studios acquired like rights and began adapting various horror properties like Dracula and Frankenstein were the first two that they adapted in 1931. Eventually, they expanded this to include other monsters like the Wolfman, the Mummy, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the Invisible Man,
This
so on and
man.
so on. Uh, these properties were some of the earliest examples of like transmedia properties, like creating these vast franchises with characters that often crossed over with one another, such as Frankenstein meets the Wolfman in 1943, or House of Dracula, which included Dracula, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein, and many of the other things that Rudy mentioned. Like, so it was one of the earliest like cinematic universes, essentially within
Mhm.
actual like film cinema. Not that like these crossovers and stuff didn't exist prior to
Yeah,
that.
and it's still, like, probably one of the oldest examples because it's still around today. Like, recently, they made a Universal made a new park, and one section is just dedicated to the Universal movie monsters entirely. I forgot what it's called, but, like, they have the new park that they released has, like, 5 different sections, and one of the sections just Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all that. So even now, it's still extremely, extremely popular. So,
I did
do you want to
talk about
mention the remakes and then we'll go into Shape of Water?
yeah, which is
Okay,
part
go ahead.
of the remakes. So this has had a long and failed history of them attempting to remake this film. Several times they've attached a director or a writer, and it's all kind of just fallen apart and been canceled for one reason or another. Some of the directors that they considered included John Landis of the Blues Brothers, John Carpenter of The Thing, Peter Jackson from Lord of the Rings, Ivan Reitman of Ghostbusters and Space Jam, Gary Ross of Pleasantville and The Hunger Games, and uh, in 2002, Guillermo del Toro was attached to do a remake. But Guillermo del Toro wanted to focus more on the creature's viewpoint as a misunderstood monster looking for love. But Universal rejected the concept and eventually dropped del Toro. And he carried this reworked concept forward, and eventually it became The Shape of Water.
Which ended up winning Best Director and Best Pictures at the Oscars that year.
Yeah.
Now, the latest person to be announced to do a remake was James Wan in 2024. However, I'm wondering if maybe they'll let Guillermo del Toro do the Creature of the Black Lagoon remake, but since he did such a good job with Frankenstein.
That's possible, but I think that I'm not sure that he'd like want necessarily want to at this point, because I feel like he kind of told the story that he wanted to tell in The Shape of
Mm,
Water.
wait, I got it. Ryan Coogler.
Oh, that would be interesting.
That would be awesome. Okay, so now I get to go on a little bit of a tangent because if you guys don't know, I collect dolls, and one of my favorite lines is Monster High. What's Monster High, you might ask? Well, imagine if famous movie monsters, horror protagonists, and creatures had children. Where do they go to school? They go to Monster High. And believe it or not, there is a daughter of the Gill Man named Laguna Blue. Now, I shared a picture for Luffy so they can have some reference. That is her, the one on top where she is most all blue with the piranha. That was her first look in Generation 1. And I find this interesting, but she's Australian. She has a
Interesting.
very thick Australian accent and uses Australian terms. And then they, as you can tell, she's also very athletic. And then in the most recent generation, they kind of changed her where her legs are blue, and then the rest of her's like this pinkish color. But she's been like one of the original monsters since they first started this line.
Mhm.
And as you and she's also how they write her is not only is she cares deeply about the ocean, she's like an activist, but they also have two other characters that were obviously inspired by the Gilman. One of the characters is literally just named Gil, and then the other one
Mhm.
is named Finnegan Wake. And
Okay, that one's very interesting. Okay.
isn't it? Yeah. So even now, like a younger generation is learning about the Gilman through a doll. um Now, another thing, I just added this because I found this interesting. Um, scientists, they're big old nerds. There is actually a moth they discovered, and the moth is named after Yoda. Well, there is a fossil with the name, I'm going to try to say this right. I cannot speak Latin. I'm so sorry. Eucridia melomitis, which means true creature from the Black Lagoon.
Interesting. That is fun.
So this was kind of fun. I do like watching really old movies and seeing which ones like hold up and which ones don't. I do think, like, all the actors actually did a pretty good job.
I would agree with that. I thought that um I think that one of the fun things about watching classics is not only do you see, like, you know, a movie from that time period, that frozen and amber feeling that old films give you, but you can then also see and assess the influence and the legacy throughout other media that you've seen,
Mhm.
because many of us probably have at least some vague familiarity with the creature from the Black Lagoon, and it carrying off a lady in a white swimsuit, and that type of loose association, but not
Mhm.
uh, exactly like what you expect all the time. Like I will admit that due to like the parts that have become pervasive in the cultural zeitgeist, I expected there to be far more scenes between the creature
Yeah,
and Kay, and there
because that was
just
also the
weren't.
poster. Like, we've seen like, and also there I was talking about, like, her swimsuit. That's, like, the outfit she's wearing on the poster. She's only in that swimsuit once, but, like, that I feel like that swimsuit became kind of iconic because of that association with the movie, and then, of course, we mentioned, like, the racist stuff. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I know that sounds like I'm being, like, optimistic, but guys, I know some of these movies, it's gonna be really, really bad. I just know some of the movies that we watch, the racism is gonna be worse.
Oh, absolutely. Like it seems that at least in this case, all of the actors that they hired actually were people of color, but they very much asked them to turn it up and play
Yeah.
into some stereotypes, which unfortunatately was not. Hell, it's still not uncommon
Right,
for
yeah,
for
unfortunately.
actors to be told.
I really wish they would stop doing that. It makes it so awkward.
Yeah.
It's icky. But I would say this is a pretty solid movie, and I understand why, Gilman's considered one of the universal movie monsters. Like I mentioned, like when he's underwater, you can't see the eyes that well, and that looks really creepy. Something that doesn't have eyes is just automatically terrifying.
Yeah.
But also, I've always had a soft spot for like fish creatures, and I think it's because I really like the ocean. But see, also, I really liked Hellboy, and Hellboy has Ape
I
Sapien, who's
love
another
Hellboy.
creature that Guillermo del Toro seems to have a soft spot for because he was in both of Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy movies.
Yeah. I definitely I think that uh the Beauty and the Beast influence is obviously much more present in something like The Shape of Water.
Oh yeah.
And um and frankly, you could argue in Hellboy too, as with Abe's romance plot in particular,
Mhm.
which I think was only in the second film, but I can't remember
Yeah,
off the top
second
of my
film.
head. But I I thought that this was just a really it was an interesting movie. It was really fun. Um, Part of me wants to know what they kind of do with it if they remade it. Like, would they would they like focus more on the interactions between Kay and the creature? Would they uh like put some more emphasis on some of the scientific aspects of things?
See.
Because I feel like a running theme in it was this idea of like how far is too far in interfering with nature for the purpose of like scientific exploration. um
See, I feel like that thing would maybe be a little more prevalent because, like, right now we have the problem of like global warming, too much plastic, stuff like that. And also, like we mentioned, like the character of David seems to be the one who's the most empathetic. Would they hopefully keep that? Would they
mhm.
keep David as being empathetic? But also, like, I think also, like, Mark, I feel like a lot of horror films have the dude who's just blinded by greed. That's a very common theme in horror, but that's always a constant too when you think about it. You always have people who are just so blinded by the possibility of fame or money or glory, and it ends up killing them in the end.
Yeah, I would probably dial up the slashery aspects of it, the gore aspect, because it was the 50s and pretty
Yeah.
much all of the violence is implied.
Yeah. There's some blood, but we don't see, like, anybody bleeding out, you know?
Yeah, we don't really see when the one character is strangled to death. They the focus is basically the Gilman strangling the camera.
Yeah. Um, the only thing is if they do remake, this movie, the Fishman has to be played by Doug Jones because he played Abe Sapien and the creature from Shape of Water. That is the only stipulation I have.
I
It has
feel
to be
like if
Doug
there's a
Jones.
funny guy in a suit, it should be Doug Jones.
Yep,
That's
that's his whole thing. That's his shtick, and he's good at
he is
it.
fantastic at it.
That's why we love him. So I would give this like maybe a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I would
I
say like a 2.5, 3 to 3 out of 5.
mhm. Again, this is aged better than some other, 50s films. I do think, like I really do have to give props to the people who made the suit and the guy who played the monster while swimming because,
Mhm.
we don't know exactly what the suit is made of. I don't think we could find that, but, like, it was probably took him a while to get used to it and adapt to it.
Um, I know that like neoprene like was involved in the production. I'm not sure what the scales were made of. I could not find any information on that.
Okay. Alright. Now it's time for my favorite part. We're gonna spin our big ol' wheel.
All right. Uh,
Ready?
yep.
It's it's Mark Shelley.
What's that?
I don't know. Let me see. Mark Shelley.
Hmm.
Wait. I think it's supposed to be Mary Shelley.
That would make more sense.
It's Mary Shelley. My bad. For some reason I put a Mark. That's gonna be an interesting episode because there's gonna be a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Are we? We're just gonna, I think, talk about her kind of like as generally, like as a human being, and
Her
uh,
work and its
yeah.
influences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, that actually does sound fun.
Because also this works because recently in they released the movie The Bride. She's a character in it.
Nice.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. It means a
Um,
lot to us.
please remember to, like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us on Blue Sky uh, at nerdsandnightmares.bluesky.com, or RSS feed at rss.com/nerds and nightmares to get updates on when we post episodes, and listen to them in any through any variety of podcasting apps. Thank you so much for listening.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.